Welcome back to the Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. As promised, we're going to dig into this fight over history between the White House and the Smithsonian. There's brand new information on this. The head of the Smithsonian, Lonnie Bunch III, is rejecting a White House report that accuses the institution he leads, quote, of extreme political activism. According to new reporting in the Washington Post, Bunch told Smithsonian staffers the report, quote, is not a fair characterization of the work and totality of the National Museum of American History. Philip Kennicott has been following this story. He wrote an op-ed about it, which caught our eye. He is a senior art and architecture critic at the Washington Post. Philip, I'm glad to have you with us. You read the White House report about the Smithsonian and the Museum of American History. Explain to my audience what it says and what you find leaky about the assertions.
Right. So this is an effort by the administration to prove a claim that Donald Trump has been making really since the beginning of his second term, and that is that the Smithsonian is biased. It doesn't tell an uplifting story of American history. The exhibitions are divisive. The wall texts are not accurate historically. It does not actually prove any of those claims. But what it really does is announce, I think, the ambition of the administration to take over the National Museum of American History and the Smithsonian, and even more than that, to really change the way Americans are taught and learn history to a narrative of exceptionalism, and one that doesn't really have much room for any of the darker chapters in this country's life.
Be specific about darker chapters that you think the administration has wrongly accused of bias or political activism, and that nevertheless tell an important aspect of our history, though it may be uncomfortable.
Right. So again and again throughout the report, they say that the Smithsonian is putting too much emphasis on things like slavery, immigration, the rights of women, civil rights. All of these things they see as part of a national narrative of overcoming, of progress, of moving beyond these evils. As one example that I cited in the story I wrote for the Washington Post, they take the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. This is a really toxic piece of anti-immigration legislation that specifically targeted people from China who were coming in to prospect for gold, to work for railroads. If you look back and you look at the speeches and the rhetoric in America around that time, it is very clearly an overt act of white supremacy. The report faults the Smithsonian for connecting those two things, even though the connection is just painfully apparent.
And is it, from your vantage point, Philip, having read this report, that the administration is uncomfortable with the narrative of America overcoming its flaws, or just doesn't want to have any flaws highlighted at all?
Well, that's a good question. I think there's a certain amount of mixed feelings in the report itself. I think somebody who's been had their hand on this report realizes that they have to at least acknowledge these things. But overwhelming, the message is that these things are really so incidental as maybe not even to be worthy of mentioning in America's History Museum, or if mentioned only in passing and only relative to our having won the Civil War, our having passed the civil rights legislation, and so forth. They really don't acknowledge any unfinished business in the American project.
Is it possible, Philip, for this administration to take over the Smithsonian?
Well, it's going to be more difficult for them to do that than it was to take over the Kennedy Center, which they did quite quickly, and they ran that into the ground. The Smithsonian is more independent, and it has an independent board of regents. But there are a couple of powerful forms of leverage they have. The vice president and the head of the Supreme Court sit on the board of regents, and Congress gives about $1 billion or more every year to the Smithsonian. And Congress has shown in the past that it's willing to use the leverage of public funding to make changes in Smithsonian content. So there are two avenues whereby, if not direct control, they can exert a lot of leverage indirectly.
Philip Kennicott of the Washington Post. I appreciate the time very much. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.